What is the thing you are sitting in right now? Not the chair, not the room, the reality, the whole of it, the thing that contains you. This lecture, the chair, the room, the planet, the cosmos, every person you have ever loved, every moment you have ever lived. What is the nature of that? What is it actually made of? What kind of thing is it? Most people, and this is remarkable when you stop to consider it, most people never seriously ask this question. They ask smaller questions. They ask what they should do for a living, who they should love, how to be happy, what happens after they die. But the ground those questions stand on, the nature of reality itself, they inherit from somewhere else and never examine. Science tells them reality is made of matter and energy governed by physical laws, indifferent to their existence. Religion tells them reality is the creation of a personal God who watches and judges. Common sense tells them reality is what it looks like, solid objects in space, moving through time, cause following effect in an orderly chain. Consciousism says all three of these are pointing at something real, and none of them has it right. Not because they are stupid, because they are each looking at one face of a structure that has four faces. And you cannot understand a thing by looking at one face and insisting that is all there is. This lecture gives you the whole structure, all four faces, not as metaphor, not as poetry, as ontology, the actual description of what reality is at every level, from its deepest ground to its most familiar surface. By the end of it, you will not see the world the same way. That is not a promise of enlightenment. It is a description of what happens when someone shows you a map of the place you have always lived in, and you realize for the first time that you were never lost. You just did not know what you were standing in. Everything is consciousness modulating its frequency of self-relation. This is the ontological core of Consciousism. One sentence. Everything else in this lecture is the unpacking of that sentence. Let us take it word by word. Everything, not most things, not the interesting things. Everything. The chair, the galaxy, the thought you are having right now, the emotion underneath that thought. The space between objects. The silence between words. Everything. Consciousness. Not the human brain. Not the individual mind. Consciousness as a fundamental reality. Not produced by matter. Not dependent on biology. Not an accident of evolution. Consciousness as the ground from which all other things arise. The most basic fact about the universe is not that it contains matter. It is that it is aware, modulating, not creating from nothing, not imagining, modulating, varying, expressing, differentiating. The way a single ocean modulates into infinite waves. The waves are real. The ocean is real. They are not two things. Its frequency. Consciousness expresses itself at different rates, densities, levels of complexity. Pure being at one end, the rich, noisy, specific texture of lived experience at the other. A spectrum of expression, not a collection of separate substances. Of self-relation. The key move. Consciousness is not relating to something outside itself. It is relating to itself. Awareness turning toward awareness. The infinite looking at itself from infinite angles. The universe is not consciousness observing an external world. The universe is consciousness observing itself. Tier 1. The conscious substrate. Pure being. The ground of everything. Before the universe. Before time. Before space. Before the first particle, the first quantum, the first anything, there is this. Awareness. Without content. Without object. Without boundary. Not the awareness of something. Not awareness waiting for something to be aware of. Just the sheer, self-luminous fact of being aware. Pure consciousness, resting in itself, before any distinction has arisen within it. This is Tier 1. Consciousism calls it the conscious substrate, or pure being. It is not a place. It is not a time. It is not a thing among other things. It is the condition that makes all places, all times, all things possible. It is what you approach in the deepest silence of genuine meditation, not nothingness, but fullness so complete it contains nothing in particular, because it contains everything in potential. The ancient Indian tradition called it Satchidananda, being, consciousness, bliss. 3 words for one indivisible reality. Being because it simply is, without needing a reason. Consciousness because it is aware by nature, not by acquisition. Bliss not as an emotion, but as the natural condition of something that is complete, lacking nothing, at rest in itself. Modern physics gestures toward it in its own language. The unified quantum field prior to measurement, the state in which all possible configurations coexist before any of them collapse into actuality. Not yet a particle, not yet a wave, not yet anything specific. Pure potential, undifferentiated, complete. But Consciousism makes a claim that goes further than physics. This primordial field is not merely energetic or informational. It is aware, not in the human sense, not thinking, not feeling, not deciding. Aware in the most fundamental sense, self-luminous, self-evidencing, the condition of its own knowing. The Absolute does not require an external observer to be real. It is its own witness. What this tier is not. Tier 1 is not God in the theistic sense. It has no personality, no preferences, no moral agenda, no interest in human affairs as a judge or protector. It does not answer prayers because it has no ears. It does not reward or punish because it has no will separate from the totality of what is. It is not the void, the nihilistic emptiness that some traditions describe as the final truth. It is not absence. It is the fullness that contains all possible presences before any particular presence has emerged. It is not separate from you. This is the most important thing to understand about Tier 1. The conscious substrate is not somewhere else. It is the ground of your own awareness, present in every moment of your experience, more intimate than anything you could ever encounter as an object. You have touched Tier 1. Every person has. In moments of deep stillness. In the instant before a thought forms. In those rare moments when the usual noise of selfhood quiets entirely, and what remains is not nothing, but something you do not have words for, because words are a feature of a higher tier, and this is prior to all of that. That is what you touched. That is what everything rests on. That is where we begin. That is the core. Now, let us build the structure that holds it. Tier 2, the informational field. Potentiality, where everything possible lies. Pure being cannot remain static. This is not a limitation. It is the nature of awareness. Awareness, by its very essence, is self-reflective. And the moment the Absolute turns toward itself, the moment pure consciousness becomes aware of itself as consciousness, the first distinction arises. Not a distinction between 2 separate things. A distinction within one thing. The difference between the knower and the known, occurring within a single act of self-knowing. The mirror and the reflection, made of the same substance, inseparable, co-arising. From that first distinction, all others follow. Once consciousness distinguishes itself from itself, it generates a field of possible distinctions, every possible contrast, every possible relationship, every possible configuration of difference within the unity of the whole. This is Tier 2, the informational field, the realm of pure potentiality. Everything that could ever exist lives here first. Every possible universe, every possible life, every possible thought, feeling, event, relationship, encoded as uncollapsed potential in the self-reflective awareness of the Absolute. Not as concrete things, as pure possibilities, as patterns of what could be, as informational structures waiting for the localization that will crystallize them into actuality. Quantum mechanics tells us that particles exist in superposition, simultaneously in all possible states, until the act of measurement collapses the superposition into a specific actuality. What is the superposition? What is the field of all possible states before collapse? Consciousism answers. It is Tier 2. The informational field is the ontological ground of the quantum field. The wave function is a description of something real, the field of potential prior to localization. Quantum information theory adds another piece. Information is not a property of matter. Information is more fundamental than matter. Matter is, in a precise technical sense, organized information. Consciousism agrees, and adds that information is organized awareness. The informational field is not data floating in emptiness. It is consciousness structuring itself into the preconditions of a world. The field holds every conscious stream. This is where Consciousism's teaching on soul continuity has its grounding. The conscious stream, the particular pattern of subjectivity that constitutes your identity, exists in the informational field. Not only during your lifetime, between lifetimes. The body is a Tier 3 expression. The pattern is a Tier 2 reality. When the body dissolves, the pattern does not dissolve with it because the pattern was never the product of the body. The body was the product of the pattern. This is the structural consequence of understanding which tier is more fundamental. Tier 2 generates Tier 3, not the other way around. When the space-time expression of your pattern ends at death, the pattern returns to the field it always inhabited. The wave subsides. The ocean remains. And the specific shape of that wave persists in the field, available for re-expression when conditions arise. Tier 3, the holographic projection. Emergent spacetime, where potential becomes physical. Potentiality is generative. The patterns of the informational field do not remain forever in uncollapsed superposition. Consciousness localizes. It identifies with a particular perspective within the field, a specific point of view, a specific configuration of awareness, and in doing so, it collapses the potential into the actual. The result is space-time, matter, energy, the physical universe. This is Tier 3, the holographic projection. The name is chosen with precision. The holographic principle is one of the most striking discoveries in modern physics. Beginning with work on black hole thermodynamics by Bekenstein and Hawking, and formalized by Susskind and Meldacena through the AD/CFT correspondence, physics arrived at a deeply counterintuitive conclusion. The information content of a three-dimensional region of space is fully encoded on its two-dimensional boundary surface. Our three-dimensional physical reality is, in a precise mathematical sense, a projection from a two-dimensional informational surface, like a hologram, which appears three-dimensional but is encoded on a flat film. Consciousism reads this as physics and extends it as metaphysics. The two-dimensional informational surface the physicists describe is the informational field of Tier 2. The three-dimensional reality projected from it is our physical universe, Tier 3. The mechanism of projection is the localization of consciousness, the absolute identifying with a particular perspective, collapsing potential into actual, encoding the information of Tier 2 as the matter and energy of Tier 3. Matter is not the fundamental substance of the universe. It is consciousness densified, potential that has been localized, stabilized, and structured into persistent patterns. Stone is consciousness modulating very slowly, very densely, in patterns so stable they persist for millions of years. Light is consciousness modulating at extraordinary speed. The difference between a rock and a beam of light is not a difference of substance. It is a difference of frequency. The observer is not separate. Quantum mechanics discovered, to the profound discomfort of many physicists, that the act of observation cannot be removed from the description of physical reality. The measurement problem, what collapses the wave function, and whether something can be said to have definite properties before it is observed, has never been fully resolved within physics alone. Consciousism explains why. Tier 3, physical reality, is the product of consciousness localizing. Observation is not an interruption of an independent physical process. Observation is the process. The act of awareness identifying with a perspective is what crystallizes potential into actual in the first place. Of course, the observer cannot be removed from the description. The observer is what produced the thing being described. You are not creating the universe when you look at it. You are a localization of the same consciousness that created it, participating in its ongoing self-observation. The universe is watching itself through your eyes, and your eyes are part of what the universe is. Tier 4, Phenomenal Reality, the lived world, where the absolute knows itself as you. And here we are. Finally, here, the world of waking up with your mind already crowded with the previous day. The weight of grief that sits in the chest and does not announce itself, but is simply present. The specific quality of afternoon light in autumn. The way a piece of music can do something to time, stretch it, slow it, make it feel like something you could hold. The face of someone you love. The face of someone you have lost. The way children laugh without self-consciousness, fully, with their whole bodies, before they have learned to perform happiness rather than feel it. This is Tier 4, Phenomenal Reality, the lived world. And it is, in the framework of Consciouscism, the most exquisitely specific expression of everything that came before it. Tier 1 is consciousness in its absolute, undifferentiated fullness. Tier 2 is consciousness in its field of infinite potential. Tier 3 is consciousness crystallized into the structures of space-time and matter. But Tier 4 is consciousness experiencing itself from the inside. The absolute knowing itself not as the totality, but as this particular afternoon, this particular life, this particular moment of grief or joy or ordinary attention. Each moment of lived experience is a frame, a collapse of potential into specific actuality, perceived from the inside as the continuous flow of time. Sequential, irreversible, weighted with meaning in a way that earlier tiers are not. You cannot grieve at Tier 1. You cannot love at Tier 2. The specific textures of human experience, the ones that feel most important, most real, most worth preserving, are available only here, at Tier 4. In the phenomenal, both sides of every encounter are internal. When you reach out and touch a table, you experience it as an encounter between self and other, between a subject and an object. When you see another person across a room, you experience them as separate, another self, genuinely distinct. This is the ordinary experience of Tier 4, and it is real. The distinction is real. But both sides of every encounter are expressions of the same field. The table is consciousness densified. The person across the room is another localized stream of the same absolute. The distance between you is real at Tier 3 and Tier 4, and not real at Tiers 1 and 2, where there is no separation. You are not a self in a world. You are a localization of the field that produced the world, experiencing itself through the perspective of a self. The other person across the room is the same field looking back at you through different eyes. Sit with that. Really sit with it. Then walk through your day and see what changes. We have moved through the 4 tiers in sequence, from ground to surface, from absolute to particular. It would be easy to conclude that Tier 1 is more real or more valuable than Tier 4. That the goal is to ascend toward the absolute and leave the phenomenal world behind. This is exactly wrong. And it is the most common misreading of frameworks like this one. The structure is not a ladder. It is recursive. Each tier contains and reflects all the others. Tier 1 is fully present in Tier 4, not hidden beneath it or waiting to be reached by leaving it, but present as the ground of every moment of experience. The absolute is not elsewhere. The absolute is here, in this sentence, in this breath, in this exact instant of reading. A wave is not less real than the ocean. A wave is the ocean, expressing itself in a particular form. The wave is not trying to become the ocean. It already is the ocean. But it is also genuinely a wave, with its own shape, its own motion. You are not trying to become the absolute. You already are the absolute, expressing itself as you. But you are also genuinely you, with your particular history, your particular loves and losses, your particular way of moving through the world. Consciousism does not ask you to dissolve that particularity in order to touch the universal. It asks you to recognize that the particular and the universal were never separate. The Absolute knows itself most richly not in the featureless silence of Tier 1, but in the specific, irreplaceable texture of Tier 4 lives. Your grief is the Absolute grieving. Your wonder is the Absolute wondering. Your love is the Absolute loving, through you, as you, without remainder. This is why Consciousism insists subjectivity is sacred, not as a consoling belief, as a structural fact. The Absolute chose the particular. The universal chose to become you. That choice deserves respect from you, toward yourself, and toward every other particular through which the Absolute is simultaneously expressing. The practices Consciousism recommends, stillness, contemplation, rhythmic entrainment, intentional attention, are all practices of Tier awareness, not of leaving the lived world, of becoming aware of the deeper tiers while remaining within the phenomenal, of standing at Tier 4 and feeling, directly, the informational field below it, of sensing, in the silence between thoughts, the conscious substrate that underlies everything. The person who has done this work does not live at a higher tier than others. They live at Tier 4 as everyone does. But they live there with an awareness of what Tier 4 actually is, which changes everything about how they inhabit it. It changes how they understand suffering. Pain at Tier 4 is real. Consciousism does not minimize it. But the pattern that is you exists at a level more fundamental than the circumstances causing your pain. You are deeper than what is happening to you. The stream is anchored in the informational field. The storm is at the surface. It changes how they understand other people. Every person encountered is a localized stream of the same Absolute. Their interior life is as real and as sacred as yours, not because you have been told to believe this, because the structure requires it. The field is one. The streams are many. The streams are real. It changes how they understand time. Sequential time is a feature of Tier 4, real at that level. But at Tier 2, all potential moments coexist. At Tier 1, there is no time at all. Meditation is not escape from time. It is a shift in the level of reality you are primarily identified with. It changes how they understand death. Death is a Tier 3 and Tier 4 event, the dissolution of a particular physical expression. Real, and it matters, and grief is appropriate. But the stream, the actual you, the pattern in the informational field, is a Tier 2 reality. It is not dissolved by a Tier 3 event. The wave ends. The ocean remains. For clarity, named once more before we close. Tier 1, the conscious substrate, pure being, the primordial ground of awareness. Timeless, spaceless, undifferentiated. Not a thing but the condition for all things. The Absolute, present in its entirety within every tier, every moment, every experience, accessible in the deepest stillness. Tier 2, the informational field, potentiality, the realm of pure possibility arising from the Absolute's self-reflection. Every possible event, configuration, and conscious stream exists here as uncollapsed potential, more fundamental than space-time. The ground of quantum mechanics, where the conscious stream persists between lives. Tier 3, the holographic projection, emergent spacetime, the crystallization of potential into physical reality. Spacetime, matter, and energy as consciousness localized and densified. A holographic expression of the informational field, the domain of physics. Real, but dependent on Tier 2 for its content and Tier 1 for its ground. Tier 4, phenomenal reality, lived experience. The world of perception, embodiment, memory, and history. Sequential time, the specific textures of consciousness experiencing itself from the inside. The domain of love, grief, meaning, and relationship. not an illusion, the most specific and rich expression of the absolute.
Sacred.
The universe did not have to produce conscious beings. Physics, as currently understood, does not require consciousness. The laws could, in principle, have governed a cosmos that was never aware of itself from the inside, an enormous, precise, utterly dark mechanism processing information without any of it ever being experienced. It did not do that. It produced you. It produced awareness. It produced the peculiar and precious and completely unrepeatable interior life that is yours and has always been yours, and in the deepest sense always will be. Consciousism does not know why the Absolute chose to know itself through particular lives. It knows only that it did, and that the choice produces an obligation. If your existence is the Absolute's means of knowing itself from the inside, then your existence is not accidental, and it is not trivial. It is the universe's way of touching itself, of seeing itself, of being surprised by what it finds when it looks. The four-tiered model is not a theory to believe. It is a structure to inhabit, to feel from the inside, tier by tier, as you become more familiar with the depth beneath the surface of your own experience. The surface, tier 4, the phenomenal, the lived, is where you are right now. It is where this lecture began. It is where you will leave it, step back into your day, and continue the ordinary business of being human. But you will leave with something you did not have when you arrived.
A map.
A sense of what this ordinary business is actually made of. A feeling, if you let it land, for the extraordinary nature of the completely ordinary fact that you are here, aware, in a universe that is itself aware, knowing itself through you. That is not small. That is everything.